Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices is made possible in part by Allstate, the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust, and CIBC.
Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Alex Hernandez of Univision Chicago Primera Hora. We airs every weekday morning at 5 and 6. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us on the show tonight. Federal pandemic unemployment benefits ended for millions of Americans this past Monday. We check in with community members on Chicago's current labor force and the impact COVID has had. Cook County public defenders will soon be able to represent immigrants facing deportation. We have the details about it. The iconic arch that welcomes visitors to La Villita has gotten preliminary landmark status. We'll hear more about this past and its future.
Where do I find my Latino brothers?
And a new American Legion post with a distinctly Latino identity. First off tonight, it's one of those moments in history that you remember exactly where you were when it happened. Today, Americans across the country are remembering the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. 9/11 was the deadliest terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Nearly 3,000 people died, including more than 340 firefighters and 72 law enforcement officers. Some 25,000 people were injured. Yesterday, Governor J.B. Pritzker spoke about the lives lost on 9/11 at an annual event honoring fallen first responders here in Illinois.
20 years ago tomorrow, the heroism of our nation's first responders became universally understood by every American. Thank God for our first responders, many of whom gave their lives that day.
For more coverage on remembering 9/11, you can visit our website, WTTW.com/news. And well, federal pandemic unemployment benefits ended on Labor Day, cutting off weekly payments to more than 300,000 people in Illinois alone. Meanwhile, federal data shows the unemployment rate in Illinois to be one of the highest in the nation, 7.2% reported most recently in July. Joining us to discuss unemployment benefits ending and how Chicago's labor force has been doing since the pandemic started are Laura Garza, who serves as Worker Center Director at Arise Chicago, and Clelia Ferro, the Program Director at Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership. Thank you both of you for joining us today. Clelia, I want to start with you. With the federal unemployment benefits ending, what does this mean for the community? Who do you see being most impacted by this?
Yes, I mean, we know that there was a large number of people that definitely were receiving, COVID-related aid from unemployment. I think I read that, out of, at least in Chicago, the large number of zip codes that were related to people receiving unemployment were mainly in the Black communities. But we know that also the Latin community, the Latinx community was really, really also affected with the pandemic. And although we might have some number of people, right, that are undocumented, there's also a large number of maybe single parent family households that will be affected with this change.
Laura, going with you, how have you seen COVID-19 impact the community members you work with at Arise?
Well, look, Arise Chicago services mainly immigrants, and what we've seen, look, the reality is that they couldn't even access unemployment. So you could imagine unemployment is there to catch you when you really need it, to sustain your families. But we know it's not long term. But Latinos in the Latino community, they were not able to access that if you did not have documents. And so they had to figure out a way to feed their families, to keep their households going. And people sacrificed. I mean, I know families that were, their kids were the ones that were able to work to sustain the family. And thank God for some of the community organizations that were out there that were able to, provide food or other resources. But the immigrant community during this pandemic has had it very difficult.
Clelia, going back with you, what have you been hearing from job seekers who are still hesitant about returning to the workforce?
Yeah, we know that there's a large number of people who are very, very much hesitant to return, and especially in our Latino communities. We have people that are afraid, this definitely past year and a half changed a lot of lives. We have individuals that were affected, maybe family members, there were deaths in the families. A lot of the kids were probably not back to school, and now we're dealing with this. Are my kids going to be safe? What is going to happen now that, you know, the schools are back in? The other thing is that I think a lot of people had a change of hearts, you know. Maybe I was doing this job for 10 years and now I see that I don't want to do that anymore. I want something that's more fulfilling. So, you know, there's a lot of reflection that is happening now, whether or not, you know, I might have a change of career. I might be a little hesitant of going back because I'm afraid. And, you know, all those things are definitely affecting the job force.
This has definitely made it harder for businesses since reopening, and I'm going to stay with you, Clelia. What have you, has businesses found it difficult to find employees? What have you been hearing from these employers?
Yes, and I mean, us personally have done a couple of job fairs, and we've seen, you know, a big demand of employers. Employers are now having incentives. They are giving bonuses for people, you know, taking the jobs, for referring someone, for, you know, keeping a job for 3 months. So we've seen a lot of employers changing their pay, increasing the pay. You know, I always tell people this is a great time to negotiate a better pay, to negotiate a career path, definitely, because we know that there's a big demand of employers still looking for people.
Laura, I'm going to go with you. What do you think are some other reasons for this current worker shortage?
Well, at the end of the day, I think that people are putting their safety first and the health of their families. And I think that is, you know, crucial to remember. And I know there's a lot of debates on why people, you know, could debate the issue on shortages, but the reality is that people are putting their health first. The other thing is that it's about time these employers are actually paying more money and putting inside of, they should have done that a long time ago. Because what we're seeing, at least the trends at Arise Chicago, is that workers are calling us, telling us that they've been there 20 years, and the newcomers coming in the door are making more money than they are, and they're offering benefits. So that has forced these employers to make sure they're doing better for all of their employees. And I hope this is a trend that's going to continue, that it's not just temporary, because it's about time that people make a good living wage and have good benefits to sustain their families.
Clelia, from your perspective, will unemployment benefits ending make a difference in potentially increasing the labor force?
You know, that's a really good question. I mean, I think it already is data that exists that says, you know, some other states have cut, you know, their COVID-related aid unemployment, and there wasn't really a bigger change on the job market. So it's, you know, it's hard to answer that question. I know that I might put some families and some communities on alert, and, you know, but yeah, it's hard to answer a question like that.
Yeah. Laura, I'm going to go with you. What do you think are some ways you've noticed COVID-19 continue to affect different industries here in Chicago?
Well, we're seeing the fact that, again, people are putting their health first, and the shortage of workers continues to be an issue. But again, I want to raise the point that it's about wages and good benefits. And so until that changes, until we, you know, the employers are providing a safety network for workers, we're going to continue to see this. We're still in this pandemic. The Delta variant is one of variant of many. And so the employers have to take responsibility in making sure that they're providing safety for the workers, most importantly, and provide good wages and good benefits.
Right. And I want to ask the same question to you, Clelia, before we go.
I think a lot of people also left the state and probably moved to other states that, you know, might not have been shut down, or they went to the other countries. You know, like Laura says, this is not nowhere near ending, unfortunately.
I want to thank both of you for joining us today, Laura Garza and Clelia Ferro. Thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Up next, details into a new law aimed at helping Cook County's immigrant community. That's a conversation recorded earlier with Brandis Friedman. Stay with us.
Immigrants facing deportation in Cook County will now be able to access legal representation from public defenders starting in January. A pair of bills signed by Governor J.B. Pritzker provides not only legal counsel, but also public information campaigns so immigrants and refugees will know their rights. Joining us to discuss the impact of this new legislation and what it means for the community are Hina Mansouri, head of the immigration unit at the Cook County Public Defender's Office, and State Representative Jennifer Gong-Gershowitz. Thank you to both of you for joining us. So, Representative Gong-Gershowitz, let's start with you, please. You were a sponsor of both of these two bills. Why did you think they were necessary?
Well, these pieces of legislation, both of them, are fundamentally at their core about ensuring basic justice and fundamental fairness. You cannot exercise rights that you don't know that you have, and the consequences can be devastating. And, with respect to access to representation, everyone deserves representation in a courtroom, especially when the stakes are as high as they are in an immigration case. Immigrants are incredibly vulnerable. They may struggle with English, be unlikely to have legal training or experience with the American court system. And it can take years for a trained attorney to master the skills necessary to handle a complex immigration case. And yet we're asking individuals threatened with deportation to essentially defend oftentimes, the equivalent of a death penalty case in a traffic court-like setting.
And Hina, from your perspective, how does the public defender bill impact the way your immigration unit can operate?
Sure. So our immigration unit was actually just launched in fall of 2020. With the goal of being able to provide a more robust representation to the non-citizen clients that our office has. And part of that is assisting them when they are in criminal proceedings. And then the second part of that is being able to continue representation of those same individuals when they are placed in removal proceedings. So our goal is to be able to provide a more holistic approach to representing individuals who may have criminal cases arising in Cook County. And the two systems are, very closely intertwined. Criminal cases have a grave impact on individuals' immigration options, and somebody's immigration status can, of course, affect what they're able to do and how they may encounter the criminal justice system. And so we felt that we really needed to have a holistic approach towards taking care of these clients.
Representative Gong-Gershowitz, from your opinion, as an immigration attorney, how does having this legal counsel affect an outcome for someone who's facing deportation?
Well, it's dramatic. Yeah, I think most recently I read a study by the American Immigration Council, which found that among detained immigrants, the difference between having representation and not having representation came down to, a matter of almost 2 times being more likely to succeed if somebody had access to counsel. In cases where an immigrant was not detained, the study found that success was almost 5 times more likely when somebody had access to counsel. So the results, in the cases aren't dependent on the merits. The merits of the cases are the same, whether you have representation or you don't have representation. The difference is your ability to articulate the merits of your case.
And Hina, you said, of course, your office, your unit is it's still fairly young, but how have you all started working towards implementing this right to representation model in your office?
Sure. So we're in the process of staffing up our unit. We're actually working on interviewing over the next month or so. I've been, considering what our representation model will look like so that come early 2022, when we're able to go into immigration court, we'll have a model set up, know how clients will be able to get in touch with us, seek out representation, et cetera.
Got it. And this public defender bill came out hand in hand, of course, with a push for more public information campaigns in high traffic areas. Representative Gong-Gershowitz, do you believe that there has been a lack of this public information for refugee and immigrant communities until this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Prior to coming into the General Assembly, I worked in immigration for over 2 decades, and it was always devastating to me to see somebody come in who would essentially waive their rights because they didn't know how to assert them. They didn't know that they had rights, and oftentimes were presented with documents and information that were not presented to them in a language that they could understand. I had cases where somebody had signed their own removal order, which in immigration cases is incredibly hard to overcome. And they couldn't understand what it was that they were signing, didn't know that they had the right to obtain counsel and have something explained to them. So the consequences for not understanding your rights can be devastating. And this is a simple matter of education.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Our thanks to Hina Mansouri and State Representative Jennifer Gon-Gershowitz for joining us. Back with more Chicago Tonight Latino Voices right after this.
Since it was built in 1990, countless people have been welcomed into the Little Village neighborhood by the famed arch crossing 26th Street in La Villita. Now, the two-story stucco arch designed by architect Adrian Lozano has been granted preliminary landmark status. Should full landmark status be granted, it will become the first symbol of Chicago's Latino community to receive that honor, as well as the first time an architect of Mexican descent has had a structure landmarked here. Commission on Chicago Landmarks member Alicia Ponce talked about why she believes the arch deserves the landmark designation.
It had a significant cultural heritage. It was designed by a known architect. It represents the Mexican capital of the Midwest. And it's a place where people reunite for peace rallies, for 5Ks, for the Independence Parade, and many other things. It's very welcoming. Making it a landmark will protect it, will protect the maintenance of the clock, which is also historic, the stucco on it. This really begins to highlight prominent architects of color. This is a, pun intended, landmark moment where, we're gonna get to appreciate all the diversity of the architects in the city.
And Adrian Lozano's work in Chicago didn't stop at the 26th Street. In 2020 WTTW special, The Great Chicago Quiz Show, Jeffrey Bayer explored the mark the late architect made on our city.
In Pilsen, murals and the National Museum of Mexican Art proudly celebrate the neighborhood's culture. To the west, a traditional Mexican arch proclaims Bienvenidos a Little Village, and one man connects them all. Mexican-born architect Adrian Lozano painted Chicago's first Mexican mural in 1941 at Hull House when he was just 20 years old. He designed the Little Village Arch in 1989 in traditional Mexican style, inspired by then Alderman Jesus Chuy Garcia, who wanted a symbol of pride for his neighborhood. One Mexican president donated a clock for the arch, and another rode in a parade beneath it. And Lozano remodeled a nondescript former Park District boathouse, adding iconic Mexican motifs for the largest museum of Mexican art in the country. Lozano died in 2004, leaving a proud legacy for generations to come.
I even knew about the Arch of La Villita way before moving to Chicago many years ago when I was in Texas. Definitely a symbol of the Mexican community here in Chicago. More details on our website. And well, the American Legion was chartered in 1919 as a veterans organization serving those who fought in World War I. Over the years, the organization expanded to include all who have served in the U.S. Armed Forces. But even as the American military has become more racially diverse, the makeup of most American Legion posts has given it a persistent image as a place for older, mostly white male veterans. Now, a Chicago man has decided it's time to change that, but making a new place for Latino veterans to find community. Chicago Tonight's Erica Gunderson has the story.
When I joined the United States Army in 2007, when I arrived for basic in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which we arrived at the airport, so it was at Oklahoma City, you had Legionnaires there. And right away, they gave us snacks and they fed us. And they're like, here, sign this paper, sign this paper. You're in the American Legion now. You're good to go.
The century-old veterans organization, the American Legion, counts all who served active duty in any of the branches of the American Armed Forces as members. But even though they were members, for young Latino veterans like Marcos Torres and Daniel Del Rivero, it didn't seem like a place for veterans like them.
I just knew they were kind of a veteran social club who wore, specific unique hats. And I thought they were just an older generation of veterans.
Once his time in service was done, Torres had forgotten all about his brief encounter with the American Legion. But he still sought out the company of veterans in his community. After hosting his own Veterans Day events for a few years, Torres visited American Legion Tattler Post 973, and inspiration struck.
I fell in love. I fell in love with it. I mean, everybody was amazing. And so I started asking questions like, hey, where do I find my Latino brothers? Where do I find my African American brothers? Where are they at? Why don't they have a post? And so I decided, I said, you know what, we need to start an American Legion post that represents those soldiers in that community. So that way we make sure that they're getting taken care of and they're being spoken for.
Tattler Post Commander Brent Webb helped Torres get a rare new American Legion post chartered. In 2019, Sergeant Jason Vasquez Post 939 became official.
I think that what Post 939 is doing is something that's really remarkable. Marcos and the team that he's built has done something that is going to bring together a part of the veteran community that has felt disconnected, and I'm here to support that 100% because I couldn't think of something that's more American, that's more patriotic than wanting to bring together the individuals that want to do good for our neighbors.
Torres and his team are building a post with a distinctly and intentionally Latino identity. Its name honors a 24-year-old National Guardsman who was killed in Afghanistan in 2008. Torres led the honor guard that laid Jason Vasquez to rest.
So Jason Vasquez, also known, we knew him as J-Rock, Mr. Logan Square. We shared a ton of similarities, and so I knew that easily his story could be mine.
What a wonderful thing that Jason would have a name or be part of a legion that it would be in our community, and it would be like, hey, we're Latinos too. We wear uniforms just like any other career, and somewhere to celebrate and come together. We're just grateful and honored. Yeah, it means a lot,
Even the post's number is Latino.
939 is one of the area codes for Puerto Rico, and it's just kind of our little trademark, our watermark that'll continue long before or long after we leave.
Post 939 has a distinct mission too, supporting Latino veterans' mental health by offering community and representation.
There's a big phrase in the military, it's called suffer in silence. When I was in the job I did, if you asked for any sort of mental help, you were essentially ineffective. You weren't doing your job, you weren't helping your buddies out. And that's something that's kind of, I think, going along with the culture of veterans. I think that's something we can change.
With regards to the veteran community, we know that they are at higher risks for suicide, homelessness, unemployment and underemployment. And so it's our job, our responsibility as an American Legion post to attack systematically these issues, one by one, for all veterans, but particularly we would like to address the Latino population as well.
As a Latino veteran, our needs are different. Our environment is different. Our music is different. Our food is different. We're always known as the culture that always wants to dance and have a good time. But at the same time, we want to share the experiences we have as veterans, share our history, the Borinqueneers, the Puerto Ricans that served in Vietnam.
If you do go to a post, you don't see pictures of Roy Benavides. He was a Medal of Honor recipient. You don't see anything that explains or that talks about the 10,000 Mexican Americans who fought in the Union Army fighting against slavery. Because when we come back from deployments or we come back from our service, it's important to keep on seeing those things so that we can thrive.
The leaders of Jason Vasquez Post 939 are scouting locations for a home base in Logan Square or Humboldt Park. But until they find that place, they're meeting here at the Tattler Post in Lincoln Square. And they're recruiting.
It's a welcoming space where they can come, they can laugh, they can joke, they can still feel that camaraderie. Is really healing to a lot of veterans.
Post 939 is on the march, and we are looking for people that want to be a part of this mission with us as well.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Erica Gunderson.
Well, like we just heard, Jason Vasquez Post 939 meets every Thursday at the Tatler Post. You can find more details on our website. Well, that's our show for this Saturday night. Join Brandis Friedman tomorrow night for Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Don't forget also to tune in to Primera Hora on Univision Chicago every weekday morning, and I'll be back here in the host chair next week. I'll be waiting for you. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Alex Hernandez. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.